Why is it so important to understand music as a language? Why is it the key to reading sheet music much better and faster? I still remember when I started learning piano myself. In my case, it was in a music school where I had the piano lessons, but I also had music theory lessons, choir, solfège, and a lot more disciplines. I never understood why I had to learn all these different disciplines without applying them to the piano lessons, or I never knew how to connect them. When we were younger, we were taught how to read step by step, right? So first the letters, then we grouped those letters to form syllables, the next step were the words, and finally we were able to read a whole text. The same happens with music. Unfortunately, music is not understood and taught the same way in every music school. For a reason I don't know, a lot of piano students are expected to keep reading note by note or letter by letter for a long time. For me, this sometimes looks like some students are very able to read note by note or letter by letter, but then they are not able to form words with them, or even less, to understand its meaning. On my piano blog, The Keys Corner, I have mentioned sometimes that I'm an advocate of understanding music as a language. To explain why, I will give you an example. Could you please read this sentence? Okay, it only lasted 1 second, but because I trusted that you would be able to do it. This happened because your brain is able to connect patterns that it already saw before, like letter combinations, word combinations, and to group them to form bigger patterns. On the other hand, I see that every time there are more and more piano methods, or music methods in general, that aim to get rid of the music language we already know by introducing a new one that is very interactive and looks very appealing for the piano student, but from my point of view, it slows down the process of learning music language or understanding music as a language. These methods suggest drawings, symbols, letters, numbers, or just other ways to call the notes that are very fast and easy to learn for the student. But from my point of view, they are limiting them to just learn the songs in these methods. So it would be forgetting about a whole world of music literature that is amazing and can be very exciting as well for the student. As a piano teacher, I think that my role is to transmit this message to my students, to encourage them and motivate them to value the piano repertoire that is available for us. But this is only possible by teaching the music language as fast as possible, as this will give them the autonomy and independence they need to read and understand it. As I mentioned, from my point of view, once the student has already learned the basics of music notations and figures, it is the perfect moment to start learning how to group those letters in bigger patterns. And how to do this? I think it is very important to understand how composers build their pieces. Starting from the very beginning, as we said before, we would have the letters or the notes in music. Combining those letters, we would have syllables or intervals in music. Combining this, we will have words, which in music would be small cells like chords, arpeggios, scales, or other patterns. And the last step would be a phrase. To understand this better, let's analyze a couple of pieces together. I always do this together with my students, or at the beginning of the process when they are starting to read a new piece, or even in the middle of the process if they are a bit lost and they don't completely understand how the language is working. This piece is called The Wild Horseman, and it belongs to the album For the Young by Robert Schumann. So the first thing I would do when starting to work on this piece with my students is asking, how does this landscape look like? And of course, with landscape, I mean the sheet music. The first few times we do this, they feel a bit confused, but in the end, they come up with very interesting answers. I find this very interesting, as it is very important to give the student autonomy and challenge them to build their own criteria. So, in this piece, most of the students would say that there's a lot of staccato and that there are two rolls. At the beginning, the right hand has a melodic roll, while the left hand has a harmonic one. Then they switch roles, and in the end, they go back to their initial role. Then we could say that the piece has 3 sections. After that, we start with the analysis. Starting from the beginning, we see an A minor arpeggio, which looks a bit irregular, but it comes from the A minor chord, and it is forming a progression of thirds. It could be very interesting to ask the students to build this progression themselves, across the entire keyboard. It could look like this. Going back to the analysis, we see that this first section is basically a huge A minor with some moments of E major, which is the dominant. I also find it very interesting to ask the students if they can see patterns or bars that are repeated. In this first 8-bar section, we can see that actually from bar 5, there's a repetition of the first 4 bars, but just with a small change at the end, just to finish with A minor instead of with E. Regarding the articulations, it is very noticeable that there's a lot of staccato, as we mentioned before, but there are a few exceptions in which we can see 2 note slurs. This happens exactly in the only moments when we have sforzato. I am going to keep this short, but this could be done with the rest of the piece, in a bigger or smaller scale. With big scale, I always refer to the form, which in this piece is very clear. Once the student sees that the first and the last section are exactly the same, they mostly feel relieved and very capable to understand it and, of course, to play it. This method is super fast if you teach the student how to use it from the very beginning of his or her education. It has a lot of benefits, not only to read sheet music, but also to memorize the piece or to understand it better. In my case, I also have piano students who didn't start their music education with me, and they come from a completely different training. But that's completely fine. Maybe at the very beginning, this process of understanding music as a language and analyzing it is a bit slow for them. But once they have done it 2, 3, 4 times, they are really thankful that I introduced this to them, because they feel they have much more autonomy to study at home and to understand any piece of music they want to learn. I hope that you liked this video, you found it helpful and also inspiring to use it in your piano lessons. Let me know if you liked it, or if you even have other ideas that could be helpful for us. See you very soon!